Hello everyone, my name is Holden Hardman and I am the Pop Culture Christian. I take a look at pop culture from a Christian perspective and find God everywhere, even in the most unlikely places. Today we're looking at the Amazon Prime original series Invincible and how Omni-Man can help us understand the problems with atheism. This video is not intended to insult atheists or belittle them, but I do think it's fair to critique any worldview, whether it's secular or religious, and talk about the benefits or the problems. We're going to talk a little bit about Omni-Man's worldview, his morality, and whether or not he makes sense. This video will have spoilers for the end of season 1 of Invincible, so if you have not seen that and you want to keep all those surprises intact, go ahead and click away, but make sure you come back when you're done. Let's go ahead and get into it. I want to talk about atheism because the song and dance that usually happens is people having problems with God if he exists, his authority if he's really there, the supernatural existing in any form, and critiquing the worldview of God existing at all. Atheists are really good at defining terms, determining criteria, and determining the rules of engagement when it comes to critiquing religion in general, not exclusively Christianity. For example, atheists are adamant that they are not a religion, and since atheism is not a religion, it cannot be critiqued in the same way that religion can be critiqued. So they can criticize religion or belief in God or followers of faith, but the finger can never be pointed back at them because they're not even in the same category. So while atheism is not a religion in the technical sense, it is absolutely a worldview. It is a position in which reality is perceived and accepted, and that means that there are implications to a worldview without God. There are implications to a worldview where there are no objective standards, where the physical reality is all that actually exists, where all that you are just amounts to being matter and energy on a random ball in space that wasn't made with any defined purpose, but you're just kind of here, where one day you'll die, and then not long after that, you'll ultimately be forgotten. Now that's a bitter pill to swallow, but it's just the reality of the atheist worldview. And that worldview can and should be critiqued with the same scrutiny as any other worldview, religion included. The season 1 finale of Invincible ends with Omni-Man revealing his true purpose in coming to Earth and revealing the real reasons behind why he's actually protecting it. Omni-Man explains how he's from the planet Viltrum and how they've created a perfect society. He explains that in order for his civilization to reach this perfection, the weak had to be removed from society. With only the strong surviving, they set out to other worlds to conquer and bring into the Viltrum Empire. They create a purpose for themselves to explore and conquer. He came to Earth to weaken Earth's defenses so that when it was time for Earth to join the Viltrum Empire, they would have no choice. And even if they did refuse, they would just be wiped out. We've even dabbled with this same idea that Viltrum has through eugenics, and it makes sense from the atheist worldview. It's why it's so hard to be a consistent atheist. Most atheists that you're likely to run into are probably really opposed to eugenics and define it as being very immoral. But there's a reason this atheist idea came into play at all. It wasn't Christians who thought this up, because it makes sense from the atheist framework. It's logical. If your goal is to make a strong society, a society that has limited and cut down on the chance for genetic defects, to purify the genetic pool, it makes sense to get rid of people with disabilities, with proclivities that aren't deemed suitable for society to advance, or groups of people where the majority of people deem them as holding society back. Atheists argue from a subjective moral framework anyway, so if the majority of people agree with it, if the majority of people feel that it's the moral thing to do, if it benefits the most amount of people in the long run, our culture and our tribe mostly agrees with it, then it's no problem. Survival of the fittest is a natural part of life and evolution, and we're just exercising that. Most of the arguments against eugenics are just arguments from emotion anyway. It makes us feel bad because we're in the same species and we're just biologically predisposed to feel bad when someone else that's like us is hurt. But if we can get back to the logic of the matter, it's not a real problem. Omni-Man talks with a calmness and matter-of-fact attitude, not because he's necessarily malicious, but because it just makes sense. He's not evil, since evil is just a subjective point of view in atheism regardless. He's just goal-oriented. He's attributed himself a purpose, and he's just seeking out to fulfill that purpose. Omni-Man explains to Invincible that because he's a Viltrumite, he's going to live for thousands of years.
You'll live for thousands of years. Do you understand what that means? Everyone you know and love will be gone before you even look 30.
He will get to see firsthand the meaninglessness of life over time. You live, reproduce, die. Live, reproduce, die. There's no rhyme or reason. You just kind of try to make the most out of it. Some people might just be luckier than others, but ultimately we all end up the same, dead and forgotten. Omni-Man talks to Invincible about recruiting Earth into the Viltrum Empire, and he gives some reasons why that might be a good choice.
We can stop wars, eliminate hunger, give them medical technology centuries ahead of what they have now.
But also just understanding that humans are beneath the Viltrumites. The Viltrumites would give them the new subjective purpose of being a part of the Viltrum Empire. And Omni-Man isn't without emotion himself. Even the strictest atheists that have processed their worldview to its logical conclusion, they're still human and they still have feelings, even if they acknowledge that it's not something real, it's just chemical and neural synapses in the brain firing off to different stimuli, but they might acknowledge that they're still bound to it to some extent. Omni-Man does care about Mark and his wife, but as he puts it,
I do love your mother, but she's more like a pet to me.
Now Mark responds with emotion, not logic.
Don't touch me.
Calm down.
I will not calm down!
If what Omni-Man is saying about Viltrum is true, and there is no God, then Omni-Man is right. Mark may care about his mom and his world, but using "he cares an awful lot about it" as reason not to join his father is not sound logic. It's entirely an emotional response. It's a huge paradigm shift and a culture shock, but that doesn't mean it's not true, as Omni-Man points out.
It's right to pity them, Mark. Wrong to value them over your own kind.
Omni-Man points out that valuing humans over Viltrumites is not sound logic. From an atheist worldview, why do humans have value over animals? I've seen some weird answers to that question because the atheist is confronted with a problem. They know intrinsically that humans have more value than animals, but they cannot justify it from their moral framework. You might step on a cockroach and kill it, but you would never step on an infant baby and kill it. If you can go beyond your biological and evolutionary wiring, you know logically that both humans and roaches are just random lives on a random planet, and both of them are going to end up the same way no matter what. Listening to atheists trying to explain why humans have more value than roaches or dogs or vermin or any other animals is always an interesting time, because they'll even say humans have an intrinsic value. We just are more valuable. Why? The truth is that from an atheist worldview, we're not. We're just luckier. We drew better cards. We're just higher on the food chain. So that's why we're more valuable. If a Viltrumite like Omni-Man comes along and he's higher on the food chain than us and talks to us the way that he is with an assessment that he is correct. If there is no God. There's a scene in the season 1 finale where Omni-Man is getting really annoyed with some pilots that are interrupting him trying to have a conversation with Invincible.
Look what they need to mimic a fraction of our power.
So Omni-Man goes and destroys one of the planes, but the pilot was able to eject at the last minute. Invincible goes and saves the pilot just in the nick of time. The pilot is very grateful to be alive. He thanks Invincible, and right then, Omni-Man comes right behind the pilot and kills him in front of Invincible. Omni-Man then goes to try to kill the other pilot.
Killed him!
Now or in 50 years when he's old, what difference does it make?
What difference? He'd have a life!
So what? It's another argument from emotion. Why is having a life good from the atheist worldview? It's not really good or bad, it just kind of is. The guy's family might prefer and feel better if he's alive, but go beyond the emotion and his life doesn't even matter. I mean, not really. This is what Omni-Man knows to be true. He's lived long enough and experienced enough to be more logical than emotional. So while it might not feel good, it doesn't really matter. As Ted Bundy points out, why is it more wrong to kill a human animal than any other animal? A pig or a sheep or a steer? Is your life more to you than a hog's life to a hog? Why should I be willing to sacrifice my pleasure more for one than for the other? Surely you would not, in this age of scientific enlightenment, declare that God or nature has marked some pleasures as moral or good and others as immoral or bad? Before Jeffrey Dahmer converted to Christianity in prison, I actually did a video on that conversion that I can put over here if you're interested in checking it out. He is quoted as saying, "If it all happens naturalistically, what's the need for a God? Can't I set my own rules? Who owns me? I own myself. If there is no God, the logic that they share is sound.
And what were they doing with those fragile little lives anyway? Listen to what I'm saying. You know in your heart I'm right.
About how pathetic and pointless humanity is? Is Mom's life worthless?
In the grand scheme of things, yes.
This is excellent because OmniMan is insanely consistent. As an atheist begins processing their worldview, if they're honest, they're confronted with the problem of futility. Why does my life matter or anyone's life matter? The truth is, from the atheistic worldview, it objectively doesn't. And most atheists are not willing to swallow that pill sincerely. So, one of the great ironies is that they do what they claim all religions do: make up reasons to give their lives purpose. Well, I may acknowledge that my life doesn't objectively matter, but it subjectively matters to me, and you know, that's enough. I may be here by accident, but you know, I'm gonna make the most out of it. Well, good for you. But the atheist who also has this realization and just wants to kill themselves, well, that's an equally valid response given the circumstances, right? Well, no, you say, they should want to live. Should? Why? You want to have your limited experience living life on your terms in the way that you want? Why should you or anyone interfere with someone who just doesn't want to have that experience?
For the first time in your life, I'm telling you the truth.
In an act of trying to teach Invincible a lesson, he holds him up with a train coming towards him, where the train passes through, causing Invincible to indirectly kill a bunch of the passengers on board. This is OmniMan attempting to show Invincible the fragility and meaninglessness of life, and how Viltrumites are just more valuable than humans.
These people are meaningless. They're cavemen without us.
And because everything OmniMan is saying is true, Invincible has no other choice but to appeal to his emotions, because he cannot argue with his logic.
You were happy here!
Sure, I was happy for a time, but I'm loyal to Viltrum.
Happiness, while a great feeling and worth pursuing, is irrelevant to life having meaning. Happiness, ultimately, is just an intangible chemical reaction. If happiness was the highest pursuit of life, why don't you just chemically induce it? Take cocaine, heroin, take some meth, do whatever you want, man. Feel as good as you can for as long as you can, while you can. The atheist who finds happiness in building a family is ultimately just as equal as the atheist who finds happiness in murdering people. Or a common retort I hear to this is, Holden, it's not the same. You can do whatever you want that brings you happiness as long as it doesn't hurt yourself or other people. Why? Where does that standard come from? Our culture? Your subjective view of morality? If you're stronger, survival of the fittest. If you're able to get away with it culturally. If it makes you happy, there is no reason from the atheist worldview why you couldn't. It's an equal response to the randomness and futility of life as the atheist that finds happiness in building a family, or a person who just tries to make as much money as they can, even if they have to screw over people to do it, or the person who sells all they have to give to the poor, or the person who date rapes women, or the person who serves the homeless at soup kitchens on the weekends. They're all the same, with the exact same long-term result. The fertilizer pit. A common atheist response I hear to this is, well, if you need the Bible or religion to be a good person, then you're not really a good person. Firstly, I agree with that assessment. I have no problem with that at all. But secondly, that's not the point of this argument being used against atheism. It's true, you don't need God or religion or a holy book to be a good person, as most atheists that you're likely to run into are typically good people. But rather, the reasonings behind why being a good person is even worth striving for lacks significantly from an atheistic worldview. OmniMan continues breaking down Invincible to try to get him to see reason.
Being a part of the Empire will make Earth better than it ever was.
And what if they resist?
That's why we're here, to show them how wrong they are, how pointless it is, that they can be a part of something bigger, or die.
Even in this, OmniMan is incredibly consistent. His subjective purpose is to get Earth to be a part of the Viltrum Empire. He makes it logical to join the Viltrum Empire. He even lists off benefits. And this entire time, Invincible has not given any sufficient reasons for not wanting to join his father, other than it just feels bad and he just doesn't want to do it.
What's 17 more years? I can always start again. Make another kid.
He is extremely brutal, but he's right. Sometimes the truth can sound like cruelty, But if there is no God, Omni-Man has not said anything that is false. This whole roller coaster comes to an end during a flashback scene where Omni-Man is watching his now younger son play baseball. Omni-Man is annoyed at the prospect of watching a game with a bunch of little kids and considers it to be a waste of time. This is where the show tries to circumvent Omni-Man's motivation by telling us what life is really about. The little things.
You and I, we made him. He's ours. When he feels joy, we feel joy. See that look on his face? How can you see that and not feel the same way? As we get older, it's harder to feel that. But our children remind us of the joys in life, shows us what life is all about. This is humanity.
Omni-Man then gets it. At least for a little bit. He then becomes invested in the game. He becomes invested in his son. He realizes, at least in that moment, that, you know what? This is what humanity is all about. We're then brought back to the present, where Omni-Man has beaten Invincible to a bloody pulp. But now he hesitates. Omni-Man is frustrated and lashes out at Invincible one final time to try to get him to understand.
You're fighting so you can watch everyone around you die! You'll outlast every fragile, insignificant being on this planet. Everyone and everything you know will be gone. What will you have after 500 years?
I still have you.
It looks like Invincible might have finally broken through to him, finally make him see the value in his son and life. And this is just too much for Omni-Man to take. So he flies off into the far reaches of space. The problem is that all of these two are arguments from emotion, not logic. Even Omni-Man's wife talks from a perspective of emotion. When he feels joy, we feel joy. As we get older, it's harder to feel those things. We need to cherish what we have while we have it. Dad, at least I would still have you. And you'll find this as a reoccurring response from atheists on this issue. The atheists pride themselves so much on their ability to be rational thinkers and how they can put emotion to the side and see reason. But when it comes to the problem of futility, why life matters, or what's the point of living, the argument must always return to an emotion-based reason. They have no choice, because the logical conclusion of atheism is meaninglessness. It's despair. Happy atheists cannot exist without some form of cognitive dissonance, where you acknowledge that life doesn't objectively matter, but you just kind of pretend that it does. Pretend that the relationships you're forming or the things that you're doing have any level of significance when you know, logically, that they don't. Atheists may not have a collective, agreed-upon set of rules or standards that they must follow, but make no mistake, many atheists can be and are hypocrites of their own worldview. They may condemn those lower religious people for not being logical enough, for having cognitive dissonance, when they themselves are often the worst perpetrators of it. When the Christian acknowledges they're falling short of the standard of their worldview and move to correct it, it makes them a better person. When the atheist acknowledges that they're being inconsistent in their worldview and seek to correct that, it can only lead to despair. Many atheists want Christians to feel doubt for having a belief in God. But I want atheists to feel doubt in their assurance that he's not there. To feel doubt in your worldview that tells you that you are a cosmic accident at best. To feel doubt that there is no objective purpose to your life. Not because it feels good to believe in God or believe in a higher power, but because the reality is that God exists and he made you with a purpose. That you are made and placed on this earth by an authority greater than any Christian and greater than any atheist. And he breathed life into you deliberately. Process the implications of your atheism and you will find logical faults in it. Not based on emotions or what you wish to be true, but by what is true. Atheism is easy, and it's progressively becoming more and more easy as it becomes more and more popular. It's easy to lobby judgments at fallible religious people. You don't have to listen to an authority greater than yourself. You get to decide what is ultimately good or bad from your perspective. You get to make up your own subjective meaning to your life. In a very real sense, you are your own God. And that sounds great. I fully understand why someone can be drawn to that worldview. But is it true? I hope that you doubt it. That's all for this time. I appreciate you watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. God bless.